Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of USL Arkansas. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. They are dedicated to helping you create, record, and publish high-quality podcasts for your audience. Be sure to check them out today at podcastvideos.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Wes Harris, Managing Director for USL Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. Hey, today, guys, we have an awesome guest and a great conversation on deck here with Mr. Randy Wilburn. Randy, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you so much, Wes. It's an honor to be here, and it's not often I get to be on the other side of the microphone, so I'm kind of enjoying this, not having to prepare in the same way that I normally do for an episode.
I know, and we'll get into that and and what you do and all that. But yeah, if I to our audience, if I seem to be upstaged by Mr. Wilburn here across the desk, he does this far more often in a much better background in podcast hosting than I do. So. But anyway, we'll get into that. So Randy, welcome to the show, man. And you know, as we kind of mentioned, Randy's just got an incredible background, and is involved in so much and doing so many great things and cool things, honestly, in the Northwest Arkansas community. And like myself, was a transplant.
Yeah.
But now we call Northwest Arkansas home together.
Oh.
And so, you know, before we get into all your cool things, I wonder if you could just kind of tell a little bit about yourself, how you came to Northwest Arkansas, how you found Northwest Arkansas, and just give a little bit more background on you, man.
Yeah, well, I love being asked my origin story. So I ended up in Northwest Arkansas in 2014. A friend of mine who is a teacher in the Sam Walton College of Business, his name is Mark Zweig, he invited me back to a company that we used to both be owners of, but the company got acquired in the early 2000s. And Mark and I always remained friends. He hired me, not right out of college, but I was a young guy at the time. And so he hired me, and ultimately I became an owner in that company. And so we had a strong relationship, very good company. We were on the Inc. 500 a couple of times. So we knew what we were doing as far as business was concerned. He invited me back to the company in 2013. I joined, but I worked remotely from New England. And I told him at the time, I was like, dude, I'm never moving to Northwest Arkansas. I'm never moving to Arkansas, period.
Yeah.
And he laughed. He was like, you don't have to, you can get on a plane from New England and go do whatever you got to do with clients. And then it was October of 2014, and he was like, hey, what if I invite Nicola, my wife, to come visit for a week? And I was like, yeah, okay, well, we'll come. We'll both come.
Yeah.
He put us up at the Dixon Street Inn. It was the perfect October week.
Oh, amazing.
80 degrees in the morning, 80 degrees during the day. It was like 60-something at night.
Yeah.
I ran the Razorback Trail every day. I was right there at the foot of the campus. And I just got to experience what life was like here. My wife visited several schools. She went to the Fayetteville Public Library, which, if you haven't been, is probably arguably one of the finest libraries in our country, if not maybe one of the top 10, 15 libraries in the world in terms of what it has and just its collection. But the bottom line was we were sold within 2 months. We were moving here with our moving truck at the end of December of 2014.
Wow.
And we've been calling this home ever since.
That's
to the point where our youngest has pretty much known Northwest Arkansas as his home way more than he recognizes New England as home. So yeah, I mean, it's a special place. And I tell people all the time that I'm very fortunate that we made a decision to come here, because it wasn't on my radar screen before I came back to work with this company. And I mean, the weird thing was, in the 90s, I was a huge Nolan Richardson fan, and I rooted for the Razorbacks in that run. I mean, they should have had 2 championships, but they got 1, and I'm happy for that. But it's just interesting that I find myself here now, and at the midpoint of my life. I can't think of another place that I'd want to be in. I've lived in the Bay Area. I grew up right outside of New York City. I lived in Boston. I've lived in Washington, D.C., where I went to college. Shout out to Howard University. I lived in Atlanta, and I lived over in Europe. So I've lived all over. Yeah, and I've experienced a lot. I got to tell you that this place is special.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's but it's one of those where people are still, they're starting to wake up to it because of the national coverage. But I think even still with that, you still get the, really? Northwest Arkansas? And then
all the time.
But then you get people here. This is the conversation we have with everybody. It's like, you get people here and they're like, oh, now I get it.
Exactly.
And this is, we all talk about it. Anybody who's ever been here or lived here, we have this same conversation, and it's almost weekly, daily, depending on the context. But this is something that we talk about all the time. As soon as somebody gets here, they're just like blown away, and they're like, wow, I had no idea. And half of them end up moving here and never leaving. So.
Yeah. And it's funny when you look at where we're situated in the United States, we're kind of like where the heart would be on the body, right? That's why they call it the heartland. And I think it's important for people to recognize that there's, it's still kind of rugged. Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking like the 1800s, this was considered the wild, wild west.
This was part of the frontier movement.
It was part of the frontier. And so we still have that feeling. We're about 3 hours due south of Kansas City, about an hour and 20 minutes, depending on how you drive from Tulsa, about 5 hours from Dallas. You have close proximity to a lot of things. And I know St. Louis is the gateway to the West, but we can get to New Mexico pretty quickly. You just have accessibility to a lot that this nation has to offer in terms of landscapes, in terms of places to visit, cultures to see, and just things to experience. And that's why I think as people start to figure it out, they're going to recognize that, oh my gosh, I live in an area where I can go to one of what I say is arguably one of the best museums of art in the country. In Crystal Bridges, you've got the Amazeum, you've got obviously everything that's happening at the University of Arkansas. So you've got a little bit of everything. The only thing we don't have is a pro sports team, which now we do. And so, yes, exactly. So it's like, so we are filling in all of the gaps slowly but surely. And as we continue to grow, we're currently around 576,000 people population-wise, and they're saying that we're going to hit 1 million by 2045. I think, and I was just talking with somebody earlier today, I think we're going to hit it before 2040.
I would agree
with you. At the rate, I don't know public math, but at the rate that we're adding new people every day, I think we're going to hit that number well before what people are saying.
I would agree with you, because I think the rate that we're hitting now, I think, is only going to increase.
Yes.
And it's going to continue to step change like that. And so you're going to get the hockey stick.
Yeah.
So I would agree with you.
Absolutely.
It's not going to be a linear growth.
No, it's not.
And so I tend to agree with you there. So, but yeah, you hit on it, right? We've got almost all the things, and if not, we're really close to them, but we are now starting to fill in some of those gaps. So like a lot of the work that like Alice Walton's doing, either on the arts, but also on healthcare, right? Like we're starting to do some of those things.
It's literally awesome. And it's the Alice Walton School of Medicine. It is. And then the whole Health Institute.
All of those things too.
It is great. It's certainly helpful to have, I think at the time, the 12th richest woman in the world. But beyond that, you have a lot of people. Alice Walton isn't the only philanthropist in the area that's giving back to this community. We have a ton of people that utilized Northwest Arkansas as the launch pad for what they were about to develop. And I'm speaking of J.B. Hunt and his family. I'm speaking of Don Tyson and his family. Todd Simmons and Simmons Food. And you fill in the blank. And then all these new companies that are here, like Charu, Thomas, and Ox, and all these startups that are finding a home right here in Northwest Arkansas. That's right, we've got startups here.
It's one of the top startup ecosystems. I guess is the right and that fosters that community. And it's right here with the work that especially like Startup Junkie is doing, and everything that they're doing. Like just everybody in the way that we rally around some really cool things.
Yes, absolutely.
As
venture
a community.
capital.
I mean, venture capital's here.
They see the writing on the wall, and it looks really good.
Yep,
it does.
I love it. So you've been here now since 2014.
Yep,
and you got out of, you kind of stepped away or got bought or whatever it was that brought you here, and you got into some other really cool stuff.
Right.
Probably the one that most people know you for is the I Am Northwest Arkansas website and podcast.
Yes.
Especially one.
But yes. I was now that that's, I have to remind myself now that that's a real thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I actually own that,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. No, yeah. It's Wes, the reality was I've been podcasting since 2009. So I'm kind of an old hat at that, but it was something that I didn't do as much as I should have. I just like talking. I like sharing and telling stories. And this podcast ultimately was the podcast I would have wanted to listen to when I moved here in 2014, but it didn't exist. I looked everywhere for information about Northwest Arkansas. It was still the best kept secret.
We were still trying to keep it a secret.
Exactly. So in 2019, when I left Zwei Group, I decided, I started my business, Encourage, Build, Grow, and ideally at the time I was doing and still do some consulting work. I do podcast strategy consulting. I help businesses get their podcast off the ground and extend their brand through storytelling that way. But one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to have more people who were like me that were thinking about coming here. I wanted to give them a lay of the land.
Yeah.
And just do it through storytelling. And essentially all I do is share my platform with other people that are here doing interesting things. And that's what I tell people, because people say, how do I get on your podcast? Well, I mean, we got a backlog of people that want to get on. But the bottom line is that, it's open and we want to share it with as many people as possible. And over the years, all that we've seen is that as we have shared our platform with others and told their stories, it has resonated with a very wide audience. And so we have listeners all over the country. We actually have a huge contingent of listeners in Alaska, which I still can't figure that out.
That's crazy.
A contingent of listeners in Australia. We have a contingent of listeners in India. And then we have people from all over mainland United States that listen to the podcast. Some that I suspect are planning to make a move here, and others that are just like, I want to see what this area is all about.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I mean, talk a little bit about some of the, what you've learned from doing that. I mean, part of what, and I'm experiencing a little bit of some of this is, in order to be successful, you have to ingrain yourself into the Northwest Arkansas community.
Absolutely.
You have to be involved.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was always an active community member, but not to the degree that I am now, right?
No.
And I know I still need to do more and will do more,
right,
with what's to come with the project. But talk about that, man, because that's a very different experience, I think, for people who aren't used to it too.
Yeah, and and I tell anybody that's from Northwest Arkansas and lives here now, you are an ambassador for Northwest Arkansas. So let's just be clear. It's not just Wes and Randy. It's Wes and Randy, Chris, and everybody else that, is living here now and calls this area home. But I found that, my grandfather taught me a story a long time ago where he said, hey, if you give to a city, it will give back to you. Not for a quid pro quo, I want something in return, but figure out a way to give to wherever you are, and it will return the favor.
Yep.
And the way that I have found to give is to elevate the concept of storytelling by virtue of the fact that we all have an interesting story to share.
Yep.
And so as my platform has grown, I've basically encouraged people to tell their story. So if I reach out to you and say, hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast, it's because I want to help you elevate yourself and your thinking about your story and about the work that you're doing. And I just think as human beings, we sometimes need that edification. We need that encouragement to, be the best version of ourselves so that, people don't think, well, I'm the only one going through this. No, you aren't. There's a lot of people going through what you're going through. Tell your story and let other people hear it. And then you might free them up from whatever they're struggling with. And it might free you up in the process, because a lot of times when we tell our story, it has a very cathartic effect.
Does. Yep.
So I think it's important. And so I tell people to lean into their stories because stories matter. And honestly, I mean, I think of like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and just the whole arc of a good story. I mean, stories have resonated with human beings for thousands upon thousands of years. So people were telling stories back in caves, and they're telling stories right now today in Northwest Arkansas.
It's how histories are passed on.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's through storytelling. It's just the way that we do it now is different.
It is. It's totally different. Yeah. No. But I mean, our oral tradition now is that we have the ability to podcast and digitize our voices and share it, and so that when we're long gone in dust, people are going to be listening to this as it's archived and saying, wow, okay, that's how they started Northwest Arkansas, a metropolis of now, I don't know, and I mean, it could be a place of 10 million people at some point in time. It could be. And then you're like, wow, I remember when. So, that's interesting.
No, super cool. So you're doing all this podcast and stuff. You've got your Encourage, Build, Grow.
Yep.
You dabble in a little bit of instruction at the U of A from time to time. So talk about that a little bit.
And shout out to the former dean of the Sam Walton College of Business, Dean Matt Waller. They've got a brand new dean now, and so I was given an opportunity. I've spoken to a number of the classes there. I've had a chance to speak to the MBA program for a couple of years in a row, and Professor Stoverink has invited me there. Adam.
Good guy.
Yeah, he's a very good guy, and I really appreciate him. And then I've had a chance to also teach some classes for the extension program, and so I've got a chance to do things with the Delta Leadership Initiative on behalf of the University of Arkansas. I've taught classes to the Arkansas Bankers Association. I've taught classes because what a lot of people don't know is Arkansas is a very diverse state in terms of economy. And this is something I didn't know. First of all, we are the number one rice producer in the world. And we're also one of the largest paper producers in the world. The people don't realize, I mean, Georgia's big, Arkansas is very big. And if you go to the south part of the state, there are a lot of paper mills. And so I got a chance to do some training on motivation with a huge paper mill that has locations all over the country, but one of their biggest locations is right down in southern Arkansas in the Delta. And so, this area is unique, and they don't call it the natural state for anything. I mean, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And so, the University of Arkansas has given me some really cool opportunities to expand myself from that perspective. And I've always done adult education and teaching, so it's not new for me, but it's new in the sense that I'm getting to do some new things around that area. But I've always done trainings and classes on leadership development, on motivation, on communication, of course, because that's my area of expertise. And I try to help people as often as possible, because typically people struggle in that area. And a lot of the struggle is simply from the fact that we don't like to publicly communicate.
No.
It's like my wife struggles with it. Most people, I mean, people would rather die than talk in public. It's like dead as opposed to get up and talk on the stage. I don't care. I mean, I've spoken to 15,000 people. I've spoken to groups of 5. It doesn't matter to me. I could do it in a heartbeat, but I'm just wired differently as far as that's concerned. But anyone can develop that skill and muscle. And so my encouragement to anybody listening is always you just have to get up there and get your reps.
Yeah.
It's like in soccer.
Just like with anything.
Yeah, well, just like with anything. My son, he's a soccer player. He loves playing soccer. And I'm like, did you do your touches today? That's like the first thing I ask him at the end of the day. Did you do your touches today? Because if you're not doing your touches, then don't come to me after a game talking about, hey, I couldn't get my ball around this defender or that defender. It's because you haven't put the time in to work it out.
I saw a clip recently, and it was of Kobe, R.I.P., Kobe Bryant. And he said that from 12, when he was 12, he was like barely making first team kind of stuff when he was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And then by the time he hit high school, when he was 14, he was, the standout that he was, and started to get noted, otherworldly, whatever.
Yeah.
And, people were asking him what he did, and it was literally just consistency of every day, 2 to 3 hours of just practice.
That's it.
And just shooting, dribbling, like whatever he could do but doing something every day.
Every day.
And he said, if you only go to practice when it's a team practice, you're never going to be next level.
Right.
You'll be good. You'll have fun. You'll whatever.
Yeah.
But if in terms of, next level and continuing to build on a skill set to be elite or to really make a step change, it's the consistency of everyday reps. And that was, I was like, I mean, it makes total sense when you think about it, but like to hear that from one of the greatest to ever do it, in his sport.
That Mamba mentality. So,
and kind of where that was cultivated. But to do that at 12 is also something. I know I was doing something very different at 12.
Totally. And the reality is that young people nowadays, my kids included, have so many other competing interests and just access to stuff. Absolutely. I mean, I had Atari, I had video games when I was growing up, but my first inclination when I came home from school was I went and hit the basketball court. I played a lot of basketball growing up. I played all sports growing up, but I played a lot of basketball. And then when I got to high school, I got into competitive swimming, and the rest of that was history. That was my focus. And I went to college on a swimming scholarship. So, I know what it is to be an athlete. And I think I wish I had maybe discovered swimming a little earlier. I could always swim, but not competitively. And then when I finally got in, I put my all into it, but it wasn't a thing where I was like 10 or 11 just going every day to the pool and swimming. And so, I've shared those motivation videos. I see those videos as motivation. And when you hear other people talk about his habits, he never lost those habits from the time he was 12 to the time, to his untimely death. But you hear Chris Bosh and others that played with him or were around him talk about just his skill set and, the fact that sometimes these guys would be just getting up in the morning. He'd already had a workout. And he was icing his knees, getting ready for the next workout.
Yep.
That's that championship mentality, but it's also a perfect understanding of what it means to get your reps in. It's just like with what we're doing here with podcasting. People say, I don't know how you do that. It's like, hey, it's just like riding a bike. You get on, you start going little by little. I mean, it's old hat for me now. So people look at me. Don't look at me. You just have to decide, if this is something you want to do, it's just exercise. It's like getting a little barbell. You might start off with the 5-pound weights. Eventually you'll put a 10 in your hand, then you'll put a 15, then a 20. And before you know it, you're pulling those 45s and you're pulling them up and back and rotating your bicep and really building something of considerable heft. And it's the same way with just getting your reps. You got to get your reps in. And before you know it, you become an expert, because they've debunked that whole 10,000 hour rule. They debunked that a little bit. You don't necessarily need 10,000 hours.
No.
But 10,000 hours can help.
And
Kobe had 10,000 hours. It took him to a whole nother level.
Yeah. But it's about habits. It's about habits.
It is.
And I'm glad you said that word. I love it. And we try to teach that too. And I'm a soccer coach, obviously, with what I do too. And it's about habits. Yeah. In terms of what's good in game or not and off the field too. But I forgot that you were a swimmer too. What did you swim?
I swam the 500, the 1,000. Every now and then I would swim the 1650.
So you're a distance swimmer.
I did distance, and I was a breaststroker.
Okay.
Very good breaststroker. I swam 100 and 200. And
you and my wife needed to be on a relay. That was the one stroke she hated.
It's so funny. I swam with a kid that was a really, we had this kid come in, and swimming's one of those sports where you'll have every now and then you'll have these younger kids that are just super fast. And I remember this kid that came in at 9th grade, and I was, I think, at 11th grade, or maybe I was a senior at that point, and he came in and he was super fast. Senior nationals, the whole 9 yards. I think he ultimately went to the Olympic trials. I swam with several people that went to the Olympic trials, but he came in. His name was Dan Bauman, and we broke the record for the 4x100 medley relay. And I swam breaststroke on that, and he did butterfly, and he was just, I think at that time, and that was fast. He was in 9th grade swimming a 49 or 50 flat in butterfly, which when you're in high school and you're not around a lot of competitive swimmers, but just people that swim every year,
right?
That's super fast.
It
was just, just blew the doors off. But I think our high school record still stands to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for the 4x100.
You get along. I got to introduce you to my wife.
Okay,
she's a big swimmer.
Absolutely. So. No, I think it's a great sport. I got all my kids into swimming. One of them swam competitively. He liked it. But he got burned out. So
yeah.
But
I get that
it's
too.
all good.
You got to balance it. No, I get it. Well, I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about it, but I want to talk and just ask you, why do you love Northwest Arkansas? And we talked a little bit about it, but like, why do you love Northwest Arkansas? How have you seen it change since the time you've been here? And then what excites you about the future?
Yeah.
Other than this.
No, those are good questions. Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, I'm excited. I mean, when you guys announced, not to get off on a tangent, but when you announced that you guys were going to bring a soccer club here, a pro soccer club, I was excited about it because soccer wasn't my sport growing up. Although I do remember going to several New Jersey Cosmos soccer matches with Franz Beckenbauer when Pele was on the team. Yes, R.I.P. He just
R.I.P. R.I.P.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember going to those games, and that's when soccer was like, it wasn't even a thought. Even though you had some of the greatest players, I mean, Pele, arguably one of the greatest to ever play the game, it still wasn't. And it was like, I don't know, fourth or fifth fiddle in a city like New York, where, of course, you had the Yankees, and I'm talking about the Reggie Jackson days, Yankees, and all that. So things were different. But I mean, I think it's a tremendous sport. It's a tremendous way to just really get out there and try and embrace something that we haven't been used to. And I think it's, the time has certainly come. And so I think what USL soccer is doing is emblematic of where Northwest Arkansas is going, meaning that this area is fundamentally, just little by little, we're chipping away at, what the possibilities are and what this area can be. And we keep talking about the little things, but little things lead to big things.
They do.
And so I'm tremendously excited about how this area will grow, and that I won't recognize it in another 7 to 10 years.
Right.
I mean, I already don't recognize some things just because it's happening as quickly as it is, but you're also in the midst of it. So like when you're in the eye of the storm, you can't appreciate the depth of that storm.
Exactly.
But it's when you pull back and take a look at the totality of it, you're like, holy crap, this is serious.
So I've been here collectively about a decade.
Right. I remember you saying.
And so I moved here in 2011 and was here for a few years. And then my wife and I moved to Minneapolis for almost 4 years.
Where it's cold in the winter.
It's quite cold. Take your breath away cold.
Yes, exactly.
But and we loved it. But when we kind of looked at each other, started having family, like where do we see ourselves? We didn't have that destination where we want to be. Neither of us. She's from Northeast Ohio. I'm from Maryland. We didn't want to get back there, but we said, where like start somewhere.
Exactly.
Is it here? I don't think so, but okay, well, where is it? Well, I don't know, but job market's great. And for what we did in consumer goods, and we still had friends that had become family, and, hey, we were really happy in Northwest Arkansas. Right. Let's try it and get back. So when we came back after that kind of 3.5, 4 year hiatus, and it's 10x that from if somebody were to leave now and come back in 3 years, like I said, that hockey stick growth, right?
Yeah.
But to your point on once you're in it and you see it, I know I drive around and you do probably too, and you're like, oh, that's new. I didn't know that was going. Yeah. And things like that. But when you are completely removed for a good chunk of time and you come back and you can just see the explosion. Yeah. We didn't recognize the place, and we had only been gone 3 years.
It's crazy. And, it's funny as I go back from time to time to Boston, which is the last place that I lived before I moved here. And, Boston's one of the oldest cities in the country. So, of course, there's like nothing new there. I mean, there are new things, but it's not like that. Like the joke when I was living in Boston is they're not growing any new land.
Right.
Because you pretty much
you develop all the land. Yeah.
Here, it's like everything's wide open. It's almost like a blank canvas. So in the eye of anybody thinking about coming here, just imagine yourself as an artist.
Right.
You literally have a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Even at 576,000 people, I feel like people that come here, could be a really blank canvas for them, not just for their vocation, but just for their living in general and all the things that they want to do and how they want to live, and being able to take advantage of all the great outdoor activities, and, being able to connect with so many interesting people from so many different walks of life. This is a blank canvas for people. And that's the thing that gets me most excited about Northwest Arkansas. And I mean, I don't care where you are. You could find something to complain about. I choose not to complain about stuff.
Yeah.
Because I would rather come up with solutions rather than have a what I call a stitch and what session.
Right.
There's no that doesn't serve any purpose.
No,
it really doesn't. And I get it. And I've actually talked to several people that are like lifetime residents here, and they're actually a little salty because the area grew beyond them.
Yep.
Too fast.
Yep.
Because, the longest time, you live in the South, it's like, oh, well, people like the slower cadence. And I always have to check myself because, the New Yorker in me is like, I'm always, when I drive, I'm always driving like, I'm like 10 steps ahead. Nobody here drives that way. And I get it. And so I've had to kind of ratchet back that. But it's coming for everybody here.
Yep. Yep.
And we have to embrace it. They have struggled with it in Atlanta and some other parts of the country where we've seen just an inordinate amount of growth. But I think from a placemaking perspective, we can be really thoughtful here about how we want this place to be in the next 10 or 15 years. And so as we start adding new things like USL, like a professional soccer team, like all of the different organizations that are bringing an office here, like a brand new medical school. I mean, we've got James Beard nominated restaurant chefs.
Yep.
I mean, we got a little bit of everything.
We do.
So yes, while we might be in the heartland and we may be really far from the West Coast or the West Coast or the East Coast, the bottom line is that Northwest Arkansas is really ready to explode.
I know the beach bum in me is the one growing up in Maryland.
It's the only thing I miss. I mean, going to Oceanside or going down, Jersey boy, going to Belmar and some of these other places. That's the only thing I do miss. But I have to say, I've done the 1 mile swim around Beaver Lake Dam twice with Swimage. Shout out to those guys.
There you go.
And there are a lot of opportunities for you to get out and get into some bodies of water. And then if all else fails, we've got nonstop flights to the West Coast.
We do.
We have nonstop flights to the East Coast. And we've got really cheap flights to Florida.
Yeah, we do.
And I can drive from my house to Destin because I got a heavy foot in about 10 and a half hours. So I can get to the beach in less than a day's time. Like I can wake up super early in the morning and hit the beach before I get dinner in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so it's not that bad.
You can get
really
there.
Want to do it because people say, oh, I just want to have the beach. Then I start asking, well, how often do you go to the beach? Because I have friends that live in L.A.
Exactly, and they don't go.
Rarely ever go.
Yep. So that's I 100% agree with you, and you can still get there. It just may not be with the same frequency, but it's if you use it and if you even knew what you had when you were there. So I agree with you. That's my one thing.
Absolutely.
But you get there, you figure it out, and get out on the lake. So get your fix. So I know you weren't a soccer guy growing up. But have kind of dabbled and become one through your kids and just as an adult and everything going on.
I mean, I didn't know much about it. I really didn't. I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't grow into understanding it. And I think once, like, my youngest is 13, he's been playing travel soccer at a pretty high level since he was like 8 or 9. And he was like one of those kids where he went to they had Oliver Soccer, which they do a rec league, and he played the rec league, and people were like, "Where is this kid? What is he doing? It's not fair. He's scoring all these goals." So eventually, we took him out of there pretty quickly. We took him to the Comets, which is a local team, and then we ended up at FC Arkansas. Shout out to Steve Oliver and Logan Lamaster and all the great coaches there, Aaron Kaiser. But I really enjoy soccer. I love it for the aspect of the team sport that it is. Because like my son and his teammates, those kids are inseparable.
Yeah.
They're all phenomenal athletes for their age range, but they're also really nice, well-rounded kids.
Yeah.
That, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and soccer instills in them that level of, desire to compete, but they're not jerks.
Right.
And that's the other thing that I like. And I've seen that across the board. And yeah, you're always going to have your folks in every sport.
You will.
But yeah, soccer has really become, I've gotten into the Premier League, La Liga. I have my favorite teams. I'm a huge Christian Pulisic fan. We took them to the CONCACAF Gold Cup when it was up at Sporting KC. And I'll share this little story, which I think you'll find interesting. My connection to soccer is really through my wife, who's from Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife's uncle, his name is Everald Cummings. And Everald Cummings is kind of to Trinidad what Pele is to Brazil.
Yep.
From a soccer player.
Yep.
And the crazy thing is, so that's my wife's uncle. So I kind of feel like my son has it in his blood.
Yeah.
And I've kind of gravitated towards it from there. But then when I was at Howard my freshman year and I was in the athletic dorm, I hung out with all of the soccer players. That was the year that we lost in the national championship against IU. But Shaka Hislop, who was a goalie for Manchester United, who was also from Trinidad, who was coached by my wife's uncle. So it's that circle of life, that connection.
He's now on ESPN.
He is on ESPN. He's a good friend of mine. But I mean, soccer, I have a real affinity for the sport. And the thing that I appreciate more so than anything, and the only regret that I have, is that I wished, and this is where USL soccer comes in, is and the team, is that I wish that I had access to an academy for my son from an early age, because I do believe he could have done that. But I just was, he was just too young, and I wasn't traveling back and forth that kind of stuff. But, what people don't realize here in the United States is that as serious as football is, or AAU basketball and all that, when you go to in Germany, there's an academy everywhere. And these kids, they get put into a program, they get exposed to soccer, and essentially, and in most of those programs, those parents don't pay for those kids to go.
No.
They go. And the coaches tell the parents, hey, just be quiet, we'll take care of it. And you go. Here in the United States, everybody wants to say in everything, and that creates challenges. But I would love to see us get to more of that academy-style portion of growth and training in soccer, because I think it would do a huge, it would really serve us well in the country, and in this country, United States. And I think that it's possible, but we need more situations like what you guys are about to do here in Northwest Arkansas. So I think what you guys are going to do is going to be a tremendous difference, and just I'm really, really excited. And it may not reach my son at 13 right now, but some of these younger kids that are just being born here in Northwest Arkansas, I'm telling the parents now who want to get their kids involved with soccer, you're going to have access to something that a lot of these kids, a lot of great soccer players that have come through this area never had access to. So I think it's important for people to recognize and realize that. And then I just think, obviously, just what soccer brings together. And then the beauty of soccer too, which is there is a very finite window for how that game is going to be. There's never, unless you go into extras or anything like that, you're not going to run into those issues where it's that game's an hour and a half, it's an hour, you're done. You're in and out. You don't have to worry about it. You can schedule it like clockwork. You can't do that for a football game. You can't do that for some basketball games. But in soccer, it's very clear what's going to happen. So,
No doubt. And you talked about it a little bit, but maybe, expound a bit more in terms of, you talked about what it's going to do for the youth, but what do you think, for you, as you see NWA and ingrained in the community and understand what soccer is, what are you excited about what a pro soccer team can do for Northwest Arkansas?
Simply for me, so obviously I said I was a big Razorback fan back in the day. It was just because I really like Nolan Richardson. Now that I live here, I'm a homer for the team. I like the Razorbacks. I like what it represents, because I've always been inclined from a sports perspective, and I understand the ability to build that camaraderie through sport. And so I see a real value in that. The thing that I'm most excited about by having you guys set up shop here in Northwest Arkansas is that now I'm going to have a home team.
Yeah.
So all my family's from Pittsburgh, so I'm a diehard Steeler fan, I'm a diehard Pirate fan, a diehard Penguin fan. That's never going to change. But now I'm going to have a soccer team that I can really, really root for.
Right.
And ever since I saw this 60-minute story that they did on Borussia Dortmund, and just how, because that Dortmund, that's a small area. It's not as big as you think. It's not
as big as you would think.
But they packed that place out.
Almost 90,000.
It's huge. And when you see them with their black and gold scarves on and everything, it's amazing. And so I want that for Northwest Arkansas. And I believe, you guys are perfectly set up to create that type of environment where in 10 years, everybody's going to be walking around with these like, hey, look at me. I've got this. I'm all set. Are you ready? And if you see somebody walking around with one of these, whether they are just all in or they're headed to a game.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really excited about. And so whether it's in its infancy in terms of, we're getting a couple thousand people out to the games, or when we get to a place where it's like you got 15,000 people in a stadium in Rogers, Arkansas, cheering a soccer match. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it.
Back of my neck right now, man.
So that's what's coming for us, and I think people need to recognize that and get excited, because it means a lot more than I think will even register with the average fan.
I agree with you.
But for those that are like into soccer or understand it, or if you have a kid playing soccer right now that's like 6 or 7 years old, there are going to be opportunities, and that kid turns out to be really special. There are going to be opportunities for that kid to not have to leave this area and go to Dallas or go to Kansas City or go to Tulsa or some other place. They'll be able to continue to grow, and we will really truly have homegrown talent that doesn't leave.
We will.
Yeah. So.
No, that's great, man. Well, you hit on everything, man. You just gave me the goosebumps. It's a great way to end it. So, Randy, thank you so much, my man, for coming on to the show today.
Thank you for what you're doing and for the hard work. And see, nobody sees this is the hard work, right? Because this is the stuff that nobody sees, but this is part of the marrow that brings things together. And you have to do that in order to have a successful organization. So I firmly believe, and I didn't even know you guys were doing a podcast, but this is just part and parcel of everything else that you're doing to help unite this community behind your efforts to build this pro sports franchise right here in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm rooting for you, as I know a lot of other people are, and whatever I can offer, I'm happy to do that, but I'm excited to see what's next. So my encouragement to you is keep pressing record, keep sharing these stories, because everybody here in Northwest Arkansas is going to get it, and they're going to be like, yeah, I'm part of, where can I go get my scarf? I want to be part of this team. So,
No, thank you, man. Well, thank you so much for your kind words and what you're doing for the NWA community.
Absolutely.
For everybody listening, don't forget to follow our journey here at pitchtopro.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts, uslarkansas.com for any details on the club, and follow us at pitchtopro and at USL Arkansas on all social platforms. Until next time, Northwest Arkansas, cheers.